Dear students, I welcome you to EPG-PAD-P01-M21-Public. Today we discuss the module Behavioral Approach, which is one of the major theories of public administration, and this is also a theory of management and organization. Actually, this approach has developed in the context of Western industrial countries, but this has been adopted as a valid theory by the public administration enterprises all over. In this module, we discuss about the meaning of behavioralism, its historical sequence, its historical context as to which point of time it came into prominence. Thirdly, its distinctive features. Fourthly, the important contributions of two of its very great contributors. And finally, its contributions and a criticism of this particular theory. We come back to the semantics, the name behavioral approach. This behavioral approach is considered to be the third major theory of administration. The first theory is classical theory. The second theory is neoclassical theory, also known as human relations theory. And the third theory is behavioral theory. Some people would label this also as modern theory. Now, this usage of modern theory is in contrast to classical theory. Classical theory is the old theory and modern theory is the new theory. There is a bridge in between, and which is called as human relations or neoclassical theory, which we have done in the previous module. The focus of behavioral theory is on realities of administration. In contrast to classical theory assumed that it is important for administrative thinkers or the managers of administration to develop a sound structure of organization. And sound structure of organization depends on certain principles, some immutable principles. You have to discover those principles and ensure their existence in the organization's functioning. With that, efficiency and economy will automatically be ensured. Behavioralism does not believe in this. Its focus is different. In contrast, they say that they focus on realities of administration. They say that any true theory of anything, whether it is public administration or management, should enable us to understand what is the phenomenon rather than how it should be. How it should be helps us to develop something to an ideal level. But before you try to do that, you should know what its currential existence level is. So this theory says that you should understand the current realities of administration rather than develop some principles and implement them. Therefore, this theory is also known as fact-based administrative theory. The second important and unique feature of this theory is that it is the contribution of behavioral sciences. The behavioral sciences are subjects such as sociology, psychology, social anthropology, political science, and these are subjects which try to study the behavior of human beings. Behavioral sciences are in contrast to quantitative sciences like economics, econometrics, and statistics. They deal with qualitative aspects of human nature. The behavioral science is based on the assumption that the values are different from facts. Value-fact dichotomy, therefore, is the central tenet of the behavioral theory. Of course, some criticism is there. Can we really separate values from facts? But just for our understanding, let's see what values are and what facts are. Values are our preferences. Values are things to which we attach importance. The values of human beings are changing from individual to individual. Therefore, values are subjective. Subject means the human being. The values, what importance to which aspects of life I give importance are not the same as the aspects of life to which another person gives importance. So values are changing from person to person. Whereas facts are objective realities. But there is a great philosophical question: what is objective reality? You may say something is a fact, but your perception of fact may be different from other person's perception. So keeping this controversy apart, behavioralism believes that values are different from facts, and if you have to have a sound theory of administration, it should be based on fact-based administrative theory. You should build a theory on the basis of facts, not on values. One more basic aspect of this approach is empiricism. It has, I think, the behavioral science revolution, one of its offshoots is the argument that there is a unity of method between social sciences and natural sciences. Here the phrase unity of method means there is one method for both the subjects, whether it is a chemistry, botany, zoology, or public administration, political science, anthropology, sociology, etc. The methods of study are the same. And some of the writers like F.W. Taylor, about whose contribution somewhere the students will come to know, he said management is a true science. So this is the belief that is central to behavioralism. Behavioralism believes that the methods of science, natural sciences, are also applicable to social sciences. And their approach is empirical. They want to gather evidence before they make a statement. So for your theories or your concepts and your proposition, generalization, the base should be evidence. Don't say things without evidence. So evidence-based theorization or conceptualization is what is known as empiricism. This is another important aspect. And like human relations school, this also believed in the existence of informal organization. In fact, the human relations school of George Elton Mayo is precursor to behavioral approach. This is called neoclassical approach because it did not totally reject the classical approach, nor did something totally devoid of the elements of the classical approach. The behavioral approach seems to have started with the contributions of the great book called Functions of the Executive by Chester Irving Barnard. This book was published in 1937. Next important and most celebrated contributor to the behavioral approach is Herbert A. Simon. Herbert A. Simon has written a book titled The Administrative Behavior, and it is subtitled as The Theory of Decision Making in Administrative Organizations. All in all, these thinkers are focusing on the actual behavior of the administrators rather than the ideal behavior or what should be the behavior of the administrators. We take up those two leading lights of behavioral approach, which is also known as behavioral school, behavioral theory. I think these are all words which are interchangeably used. Coming to the contributions of Chester Irving Barnard, there are three ideas which are very important as contributions to administrative theory. The first one is about acceptance theory of authority. The second one is his conception of functions of the executive. And the third important contribution of him is his concept of zone of indifference. And fourthly, perhaps, we can also mention his theory of communication. We shall take up these four one by one. Now, coming to the acceptance theory of authority, Chester Barnard said, contrary to the earlier notions of authority as the command of the superior, authority is vested with the superior. Authority vests with the higher reaches of hierarchy. The boss gives orders, and therefore authority is the command of the superior. This was the earlier notion. Chester Barnard disputed this. Authority is not manifest just by somebody giving orders. Authority is manifest, authority becomes real only when the subordinate accepts the order and complies with it. So therefore, Bernard says the location of authority, the locale of authority is not the boss but the subordinate. And for this, let me combine the fourth point, which is theory of communication. Bernard says that communication is very important in administrative organizations. There is a theory of communication in Chester Bernard's writings in his book, Functions of the Executive. Communication is the bloodstream of administration or management. Without communication, administration does not function. For Bernard, accepted communication is authority. And he is conveying the idea that all communications, there are of course different kinds of communications between individuals within the organization. There may be formal communications, informal communications. But formal or informal, if the communication meets with acceptance, then authority is real, authority is there. So therefore, to put it in the form of a formula, we can say that communication plus acceptance is equal to authority. Let me just repeat. Communication plus acceptance is authority. Communication minus acceptance is not authority. And says, what is the basis of acceptance? Under what circumstances a subordinate would accept the superior's communication? He lays down 4 conditions for authority to manifest, for communication to meet with the acceptance of the subordinates. Condition number 1, the communication must be intelligible. The communication must be understood by the subordinate in the same way as the superior wants him to understand. There should be one-to-one between the superior's communication and the subordinate's perception of that communication. And there are many occasions when what superiors ask, the subordinates may not follow because of various reasons. Because of our colonial hangover and continuance of English as a major official language in our country, the communication takes place in English and the higher levels of bureaucracy are comfortable with English. Their orders and their communications are mostly in this particular language. But the subordinate bureaucracy may not be very comfortable with that, and there are chances that they would not understand this. And in a pluralistic society like ours, multilingual society like ours, there are so many languages. And one language is not guaranteed that there will be perfect communication between two people speaking the same language because of the dialect variations. It's said that in our country, every district has its own particular idioms, particular usage of the words. Each district, the language is changing. So if that being the case, I think one communication will not get the acceptance of all because they will not understand the same communication in the same way all across. So this is the first condition. The second important condition, assume that the subordinate understands the order. He has the sufficient command over language. Okay, this test is passed, but what next? The next important thing is he should have the ability to implement what is asked by, what the superior is asking him to do. He should have the ability. The ability is of two kinds, the mental ability and the physical ability. The physical ability is the locomotive ability to have the energy levels and things to do. And the mental ability is ability to understand, follow the communication in true spirit, and to implement the commands of the superior in the way he would expect him to do. So it requires certain mental ability also. Sometimes the communication fails. The communication may not meet with acceptance because the fellow is unable to physically comply with that or mentally comply with that. Okay, the second test is also passed. The subordinates has the mental and physical ability. The third important condition for communication to be accepted as authority is it should not go against organizational interest. What Bernard says is that every employee of the organization, when he joins, he thinks that he has to promote the interests of the organization. And if there is an order, even it is given by superior, which is against his assumption that he is supposed to promote the organizational interest, but the boss is saying something to negate this, the subordinate will be in doubt. He may not be willingly doing that. So this is the third condition. And even if this is there, maybe the communication is such that it is not against the organizational interest, or somehow the subordinate is convinced that even if it is against the organizational interest, he has to do it because of a very exacting boss. But there is the fourth condition, and the most important of all these conditions, which is it should not go against the personal interest. The fellow always have a personal interest, and the behavioralism is talking that the ideals of administration, you give orders without botheration of the individual interests. After all, every employee has individual interest, and you have to take care of that. So this theory not only is laying down conditions for communication to be effective, but it is also showing limits of authority. Authority has to be used in such a way that people care for these things. And if they see these things, the authority can really manifest itself, and the communication may turn out into a valid authority. Now, the next important thing is conceptualization of the functions of the executive. I think as students of public administration were already aware of post-corb, POSD-CORB, which is a formulation of Luther Gulick, one of the classical thinkers. Luther Gulick has given a formulation of functions of the executive, or functions of the officers, to put in our own language. What all officers are doing, whether it is in public administration or private administration. Luther Gulick made a conceptualization. He says they do these 7 kind of activities: planning, organizing, staffing, directing, coordinating, reporting, and budgeting. These are the functions of executive. Now the behavioralists, more particularly Chester Barnard, has given a altogether different formulation of executive functions. He says the functions of executives are not these, they are different. Number 1, he has to establish the purposes of the organization. The first and most important function of an organization's chief executive is formulate the purposes of organization. What is the central purpose of the organization? Unfortunately, in most of the organizations, the central purpose is not known. Nowadays, in business management, there is a development called strategic management, where every organization, business organization, is mentioning the vision and mission, wherein they are articulating the central purposes. And that is also coming into under the Right to Information Act. The government organizations are also expected these days by the government of India to formulate such things. Any citizen is entitled to know what is the mission and vision of the office. Now there is an attempt to do this. But the time when Barnard was writing, it was all assumed that everybody knows the purpose of the organization. There is no need to formulate one. But he said that's very important. The second important thing is the purpose of organization is establishing a system of communication. Communication to Chester Barnard is a very, very important function of administration. The administrator's success will be measured by his ability to communicate. And he said communication should be continuous. Communication should be understood. The channels of communication should be direct as possible. And communication is very important in organizations, and that will improve the efficiency of the organization. He also stressed upon the importance of informal communication. The next important function of organization is the organization is viewed by him as a cooperative effort. He says that an organization is necessary because of the limitations of the individuals. No single individual can accomplish all the objectives of the organization. Therefore, there is a need for organization. Organization is a body of human beings with some specific relations. Cooperation is the basis for its continuation. If in the organization there is no cooperation, organization will become disorganization. And it also says that all human beings have their limitations. So organization is meant to mutually complement each other's limitations. The synergy will be such that it will ensure the accomplishment of the objectives. Yet another important contribution of Chester Barnard is his concept of contribution, satisfaction, equilibrium. He views the relationship between an employee and an administrative organization as a twofold relationship. One is the employee is contributing to the organization. So this is from the employee side. And the organization is also contributing, and its contribution is known as satisfaction. Barnard says that there should be equilibrium. What it means is, if the contribution is more and satisfaction is less, satisfaction subsumes all kinds of things like salary, perks, treatment, recognition, all kinds of things. An employee's satisfaction, or what the organization does by the employee, must be such that it is in equal proportion to what the contribution he makes. So there will be enduring relationship between individual and the organization if there is contribution, satisfaction, equilibrium. If this equilibrium gets disturbed, say for example, the individual is making more contributions than what satisfaction is getting, this will not be sustainable relationship. He is contributing more, and a time will come, he will think that I am doing more, but without getting much. So he will snap his relation, he will move out, or he will become casual. He will, may not be performing at the level he would be performing otherwise. Similarly, he is getting more satisfaction than what he is contributing. Organization will go out of existence. Either the individual goes out or organization goes. So there is a delicate balance between contribution and satisfaction. So all administrators should be aware of this, and they should figure out all the formal contributions, informal contributions, all the formal satisfactions and informal satisfactions. Somewhere they should strike a balance and ensure that there is an equilibrium maintained, and therefore it goes on. Well, this is one major thinker. Another important writer in the genre of behavioral scientists is Herbert A. Simon. As I have mentioned, his ideas are gleaned from two major sources. He wrote an article known as Proverbs of Public Administration. And the second major contribution, this was a short essay, and the second contribution is his magnum opus, great work, the title of which is Administrative Behavior, subtitle Theory of Decision Making in Administrative Organizations. In the first write-up, which is about Proverbs of Administration, Simon frontally attacks the classical theory, particularly the proverbs of the principles of administration, and he says that these principles are nothing better than proverbs. The metaphor of proverbs is used by him. There are so many kinds of proverbs. Sometimes there are proverbs which are having opposite meaning. Haste is waste. Thus he has disputed the validity of principles. Like proverbs, these principles of administration occur in pairs, one opposite the other. If you follow one principle, you have to sacrifice another principle. And any such situation does not warrant something to be called as a principle or the whole body of knowledge as principles. So this was a serious debunking of the principles of administration. Therefore, he was seriously disputing the essential contribution of the classical theory. So therefore, one of his contribution is deconstructionist. He was deconstructing the classical theory by abolishing it, dismantling it. The next is reconstructionist. His idea in demolishing the classical theory's contributions, particularly the principles of administration, is not that there cannot be a theory of administration, but a more valid theory of administration has to be founded on behavioral foundations. And for this, he has contributed his own theory known as theory of decision making. Simon says decision making is the heart of administration. If one were to understand what administration is, the most important focal point would be how decisions in the organization are made. The quality of decisions determine the quality of organization. So therefore, he paraphrased administrative behavior as theory of decision making. Administrative behavior is nothing but the study of decision making. He said in any decision making, he tried to be little analytical. This approach is also known as empirical and analytical. Let me just mention in passing, the whole behavioral theory is both analytical and also empirical. Analytical in the sense they go to the root elements and try to tell us what it is. Simon says there are 3 phases in decision making. The first phase of decision making is intelligence phase, PHASE. The second phase is design phase. The third phase is choice phase. Now, in any typical decision making, these things may not be logically happening in the same sequence. But for our analytical reasons, we may divide decision making into 3 areas, 3 steps. The intelligence stage is problem recognition stage. You need a decision. You make a decision only if there is a problem. And proper understanding of problem is important. You should get as much of information about the problem as possible. So you should have a rounded understanding of the problem. This is what is known as the intelligence stage, information gathering stage. The second phase is the design stage. Design stage is one where Simon says, there are many alternatives for decision making. To do anything, there are different alternatives. To design an apparel, or to design a piece of artwork, or to manufacture something, there are different processes. So there are different alternatives. The second phase, we should weigh all the alternatives. What are the different alternatives? Alternative A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. Your decision making can be efficient. You can have a very good, efficient, rational decision making if you can figure out all the alternatives. So identifying alternatives, knowing the details of alternatives is the second phase called design stage. And the third phase is known as choice stage. So from the different alternatives, you select one. And therefore, decision making is a 3-step process: intelligence, design, and choice stage. And in the choice stage, there is influence of values and facts. He exposes one of the dilemmas of administration. Any administrator, while taking decisions, will base his decisions on 2 premises. Premises means foundations. 2 considerations, to put it more simply. One is the values, the other one is facts. There is somewhere his preferences. Now, preference of caste, you may say, preference of gender, preference of ideology, preference of region, preference of religion, preference of friendship. You see, there are ever so many things, and this fact is well brought out by human relations theory and informal theory of organization. Every human being is not a machine. He has some, human likes and dislikes and all that, biases and all that. So this is one thing that sways your decision. Maybe the decision eventually that you take is weighed by some value considerations. As long as human beings are there, their values are bound to be there. And then second important premise is facts. Now he makes a comparison between values and facts by bringing the analogy of the ends and means. The values are like ends, objectives. The facts are like means. Facts are objective, values are subjective. Facts may be amenable for proof or dispute. Values, there is nothing like a good value or bad value. Values are just values. Now, the greatness of Herbert Simon is, I think, he received Nobel Prize. He is the only contributor that we come across in the whole gamut of thinkers of administration and management and organization who has received Nobel Prize. Simon received Nobel Prize for his outstanding contributions to decision making. The concern of Simon was to inject as much of rationality as possible into decision making. He was aware that total rationality in decision making is elusive. He used the concept of bounded rationality. Simon said that rationality is not absolute. Rationality is having some limits. There cannot be 100% rational decision anybody would take. Maybe one limitation is the information limitation. You do not know full well about all the facts to take a decision, but you have to take a decision in time. Decision delayed is perhaps a decision denied also. You cannot wait for too long. You have to take. And most of the administrators, particularly the public administrators, working in important departments, they have no time. They have a pressure of time and they have to take a decision. And therefore, information limitation may be one. Therefore, there is bounded rationality. And there is the problem of values also, the mediation of values. Because of your values, you don't take the real good decision, but you take a decision that satisfies your personal preferences. He said there are two kinds of decisions, routine decisions and non-routine decisions. The routine decisions are repetitive decisions. He said the routine decisions can be mechanized or automated. By automating these decisions, you can ensure rationality. So these are the major ideas of Bernard and Simon, who are the essential behavioralists. And these theories have taken administrative theory to a high pedestal. And it has taken them to a pedestal of science. Although Taylor, F.W. Taylor, argued that management is a true science, and in his contributions perhaps he did not have enough of this kind to build up the body of administrative theory on scientific lines. Now, some major criticism against the behavioral theory is that perhaps some people believe that as long as values are there, you cannot have a totally rational theory of administration. Of course, Simon was very careful in doing that. He has cautioned that there is something known as bounded rationality, but he has tried to automate and all that. All those things notwithstanding, it is not possible to develop decision making to a level of absolute science. Just to recap the whole thing which has been done in the course of this module, we have tried to explain what is behavioralism and what is its logical place in the sequence of the evolution of the theories of administration, who are the important contributors to behavioralism, what are the specific contributions of these major thinkers to behavioralism, what is the contribution of behavioralism to the theory of administration, and finally some critical points about their validity or otherwise. Thank you once again.